Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Joni, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. I-47 male was a police officer for 13 years at the time of this story. I'd been married to my wife for 9 years. She was such a good girl, and I guess she had to be since I wouldn't hesitate to arrest her. Before we married and she moved from her home state, she was a medicinal vape user. In our state, it wasn't legal, and since she was marrying me, she quit using it. A few years later, she became a reporter for CJP News. I was extremely proud of her, and so was our family. She was a popular face around our city, and people respected her. I attended parties with her and heard jokes like, "Put the drugs away." We always just laughed it off. It never occurred to me that she might resent me a little for her having to stop her medicinal drug use. She started acting weird at home when she'd say things like, "Oh, I better not do that, 'cause I wouldn't get away with it." Or when she said I was smothering her. She very much had her own life, and I didn't go with her everywhere. I just mentioned her that she'd been getting home later than usual, and she immediately jumped to defend herself by blaming me for something. This was not her usual behavior. She was normally kind and sweet, and nothing was wrong between us. There were many other things she said and did that were out of character, but I just continued to talk to her as I normally would. I knew she'd just argue with me if I tried bringing up anything, so I drove to her work one night. She was still in the building somewhere, even though it was late. I showed my officer's badge to take a look at the cameras in the security office. No joke, the guard sitting in the room was eating a donut, watching me search through the footage. It didn't take long for me to find a shot of my wife's office. It showed her walking out of frame, so I had to find the camera she went to, which pointed at 2 work desks. One of those being AP. A man she worked with for several years at this point. Like my wife, he was one of the ones on television. The donut-eating guard watched with me as my wife, and AP began having intimate on camera. It was slightly obscured, but you could see what was going on. I was obviously distraught, so the guy reassured me. He said there's plenty of fish in the sea, and with this evidence I could get them fired. I filmed it on my phone and thanked him. To no surprise, I got home before her. When she got home, she tried to kiss me. I couldn't play along. I pushed her away, and she was shocked. I looked into her eyes and told her I knew everything. She was on the spot and put her hand on her heart. Her eyes got huge and she froze in place. She asked me what I was talking about, but I just kept telling her I knew everything and convinced her to admit it. She broke down and asked me to forgive her because she only slept with AP to help him feel like living again. He just lost his wife and kids and felt like life was pointless. I called her a cheater and said she didn't deserve to be my wife. I told her she failed me and her families. She started crying, but nothing compared to when I said I was going to turn in the video evidence to her boss. She looked like her soul left her body. She asked me how I had a video. So I told her I was in the security office that very night, recording what they so shamelessly did. Her eyes and demeanor completely changed. She begged me not to share the video with anyone by dropping to her knees and proclaiming that she could make it all better by quitting her job and doing whatever I wanted. This was nonsense to me, just the ramblings of my crappy wife, fearing the reality she brought upon herself and AP. It was really hard for me to accept that she was indeed crappy. For so many years I thought she was worthy of my love and affection. But as soon as she thought she could get away with it, she started an affair and justified it by saying I was controlling her. As a last-ditch effort, with her bags packed, my wife asked me once more not to ruin our lives. I told her I was surprised she saw it that way, because her actions brought us here. It was like she was asking to be with another man by sleeping with him. So now she was just getting what she wanted, right? While my wife disagreed and swore she would do anything for me to forgive her. I told her no and finally shut the door. She slept in the car that night, as I told her family and friends what happened. I posted the video online, tagging her. I even posted it on the CJP News website. Even though it was taken down almost immediately, the company who owned the news channel saw it. AP and my wife were fired before morning. She wakes up to find that she is being divorced, disowned, and fired for a celebrity-like job. None of her friends or family volunteered to take her in, crediting me for being a wonderful man and officer who deserved more than what she gave me. Now let's get into today's second story. I, 38 male, was best friends with a man named Tony since we were 8 years old. We basically became brothers and went through school telling people we were. After graduation, we got an apartment together, and he was the first one to meet my future wife. He was supportive and even vowed to protect both of us whenever we were with him. He wasn't afraid of getting sappy with me. We meant a lot to each other. Despite our closeness though, Tony and I disagreed when it came to drinking alcohol. He drank daily, but kept it after work and on the weekends. I never saw him call off work or do anything irresponsible. For that reason, our friendship prevailed, and I never brought up his drinking. After my wife and I married, I moved out of the apartment. She didn't drink as much as my best friend, but she did enjoy wine and wine tasting. After 8 years of marriage, Tony was very much a part of our lives. I trusted him wholeheartedly, so when my wife bought 2 tickets to a wine tasting getaway, with one overnight, I asked him to take her for me. I didn't necessarily like that my wife was into wine, but I wouldn't stop her from going to this peaceful place that she would enjoy. Since she was beautiful and smart, I didn't want her to go alone and encounter anyone that would try to take advantage of her. Tony was happy to go, and promised me everything would go well with him there. Since my wife expected to drag me along, they only got 1 hotel room. She didn't bother to bring this up to either of us. The next thing I remember is showing up at the wine tasting as a romantic surprise for my wife. I tapped her on the shoulder and planted a kiss when she turned around. She smacked me. She was so surprised. I laughed about it, but as I laughed, I noticed the terror in both of their faces. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I started telling them that while I was working, I couldn't stop thinking about them, and it felt like it was important for me to join them. They looked absolutely sick, even though they were trying to smile and avoided looking at each other. Throughout the rest of the day's activities, my wife tried to seem normal, but she was anything but that. She would say completely random things and point out stuff that wasn't important in an attempt to fill the silence. My best friend, Tony, was eerily silent and kept apart from me. I elected to stay in wine country for another night, so we stayed in the same hotel room they cheated in. I did this specifically because of their behavior, and I wanted the truth. Since there were 2, I asked which beds they slept in, and they both started stammering. My wife excused herself and retreated to the bathroom. My best friend, Tony, couldn't contain the truth any longer. He started by telling me he couldn't stand the thought of failing to be my best friend. It was killing him to think he might never see me again. I pretended to be confused, but I already had a feeling they made a terrible, irresponsible mistake. He told me they were very drunk the night before, because she'd been upset about me refusing to go. When they got back to the hotel room, she came out of the bathroom naked and started kissing him. He couldn't stop her, and then that's when he stopped talking. As calmly as I could, I asked him if they had intimate. He just swallowed hard, and no words came out. I punched him. It reminded me of when we used to horse around as kids, except this time he had intimate with my wife. I truly hated him. With him speechless and holding his face, I yelled through the bathroom door to my wife that I'll never trust her again. I walked out of the hotel room, headed for my car. She screamed in protest and followed me to the parking lot, but I went home without her. Within 5 hours, Tony showed up at my door. I didn't know if my wife was hiding somewhere outside or in the car. He begged me to forgive him and swore he would never make this mistake again. I just said of course he wouldn't, because he was no longer my friend and wouldn't be meeting any future woman in my life. I yelled that after so many years, I thought he deserved my trust and was respectable enough not to sleep with her. He did the worst, most unforgivable thing he could have done. I accidentally spat on him. I was that worked up. I shut the door in his face because I couldn't believe a word he said. I told everyone what happened. Our friends and family were all the same people, basically. No one could believe it. After receiving tons of hate from their friends and our family, Tony pretty much became a hermit. He didn't leave his apartment for a while, and didn't have anyone to hang out with. My wife tried sending me provoking messages, like it was my fault for failing to forgive them for this one mistake. She also tried to send messages for pity, calling herself names, and admitting she didn't deserve happiness. I didn't reply to anything, even though they were both drinking. It was up to my wife to get another hotel room when she found out I wasn't coming, or if they had any respect for me or self-control at all. They simply would have gone to bed and pretended the other person was sexless. They both failed me, and I wouldn't have them in my life anymore. I've since bonded with other friends and have been dating a wonderful woman. She understands the emotional torment I've gone through and only earns my trust daily. I have no reason not to trust her because it wasn't her that cheated on me.